Mr. Ganesh, Rajaram.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, firstly, let me declare my interest. I run the Asian business of a multinational media company, Fremantle Media International. Sir, I would like to start by commending the Ministry for this review and the proposed amendment of the Film Act. The last major review was in 1998, and in the last 20 years, there have been significant technological and industry developments that warrant amendments to keep the Act relevant. In particular, the amendments will help cater to the advancements brought about by the digital revolution, strengthen the protection of minors, and generally make it easier for businesses to function. Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me now look at some of the key amendments more closely. The first is the class licensing requirement for video game retailers to enhance the protection of minors. As video games have become more sophisticated and include mature content on sex, violence, drugs, retailers should be taken to task if licensing conditions are breached. This amendment will ensure that all retailers will have to comply to licensing conditions like labeling and age checks. However, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this amendment only applies to physical copies of video games. Increasingly, I've discovered as a parent of a teenager, children buy their games online. What this means is that platforms like gaming consoles and apps are the most common transaction platforms for upgrades and purchases of new games. Parents' PayPal or credit card accounts are required for such purchases. These payment details are usually stored after the initial purchase, with authorization necessary for subsequent purchases. The onus, therefore, must be on parents to scrutinize the games that their children purchase online and to make sure that the games are suitable for their kids. I know of many parents who, because of their hectic schedules, are happy to approve these purchases without due assessment. I urge parents to monitor their children's online purchases until such time when laws governing such online purchases are amended to adequately protect minors. Mr. Speaker, sir, another amendment that is most welcome is the formalization of the co-classification scheme for films. Co-classification of content is not a new phenomenon and has been tested in several countries and adopted successfully. The IMDA, or MDA as it was known then, also successfully piloted a test co-classification scheme in 2011 and classified some 2,300 titles rated PG-13 and below. The scheme, sir, is a pro-business and consumer move. It's pro-business and driven by the commercial market. Some quarters have commented that co-classification could lead to self-censorship so that distributors and exhibitors could show the films to a bigger audience. This is not necessarily true, as I think we need to give our audiences a little bit more credit. These are commercial decisions, and the market tends to regulate itself. One example is the 2007 film Lust, Caution. The distributor originally wanted to release the film as an edited NC-16 version, but after public feedback, released the original film under the R21 rating. The distributor decided to show several versions of the film to attract a bigger audience. And in other cases, distributors will tend to have just the one edited version because of cost considerations. Mr. Speaker, sir, this very obviously serves to show that these are decisions best left to the market to decide based on commercial factors. The co-classification scheme also allows for PG-13 and below titles to hit the market more quickly. This is pro-consumer, as Singaporean audiences can be the first to watch these films. It has also the desired effect of shortening the window for piracy. This move allows for producers of films and exhibitors to engage in more robust debate about classifications, and this inevitably will build stronger industry capability and better understanding of classification guidelines and processes. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, the scheme is optional. Films can still be sent to the IMDA for classification if the distributors want to. Another important amendment to the Act is the granting of relevant enforcement and investigation powers to the IMDA. There has been understandably a bit of a furor over this proposed amendment. However, Mr. Speaker, I think that when it comes to films that could undermine our social fabric, disrupt our racial and religious harmony, as well as national security, these investigative and enforcement powers, carried out with discretion and attention to detail, will be a very small price to pay. What is of most concern for some quarters is the granting of powers to IMDA officers to enter and search premises without warrant and seize equipment, in particular equipment used to procure a livelihood, such as professional cameras for filmmaking, and also personal equipment such as laptops and phones. The issue here is the possible abuse of power and the privacy of the individuals being searched. There is much concern that the proposed powers of search and entry without warrant could be open to abuse. Mr. Deputy Speaker, while I acknowledge the deep concerns in this area, there is also the argument that the majority of law-abiding Singaporeans, legitimate filmmakers, and family home movie enthusiasts alike would have little to fear. However, I would like to ask the Minister for more clarity on the following, as many of my parliamentary colleagues have done just now. Firstly, how senior are the IMDA officers who will be entrusted with these powers? While I understand that these officers will undergo training with the home team, what is the nature and duration of this training? Secondly, when is an offense considered serious enough for these officers to enter premises and to seize equipment? Is there a process for a senior authority in the ministry to assess the facts of the case and to authorize the raid? Thirdly, what is the recourse for people who have been the victim of these raids, who may have been wrongly implicated? I hope the Minister can share these details, as they will allay some public fears. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the final amendment I would like to focus on is the strengthening of the classification and appeals process. One suggestion from some interest groups is that the Films Appeal Committee be made up of nominees from all its stakeholder groups. This, in my view, could make the regulatory process an arduous one, with different interest groups lobbying their representatives to influence the committee's decisions. Perhaps a more practical approach would be for the ministry to consider options that would ensure that the committee reflects a broad representation of the average Singaporean film audience. This would ensure that any allegations or concerns about dominance of a particular lobby group or a vocal minority can be addressed. And once these appointments are made, the ministry should make public the names and the bios of all committee members. Another issue that has prompted feedback is the amendment to make the minister the final authority to hear the appeals for films with national security concerns. I am in complete support of this amendment. Given the uniqueness of our social fabric, which is dependent on racial harmony, national security could be undermined by films that promote or reflect values and tenets contrary to this. And with the digital disruption upon us, foreign influencers can also target the creative community through funding and other more sophisticated means. I believe that the minister would be best placed to decide on appeals concerning such films, as he will have the entire machinery of the government security agencies, to examine the sensitivities of the issues involved. I believe the minister will also consult the Films Appeal Committee before making his decision, and this should allay the concerns of the filmmaking community. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Films Act Amendment Bill is important and timely in this era of convergence. I support the bill.